Okay class, in this lab I'm going to show you how to set up an NLB cluster. I've signed into ACE-IT. I clicked on the lab CTS1390C and I'm going to scroll down to all my virtual machines. Now I just did this, but if this is amber color, not green like this, turn this machine on. Give it a few minutes so it's actually up and running. You should have the desert scene. So the next thing I'm going to do is boot up www1 and www2. When I create a cluster, I need something to cluster, so I'm just going to use a web application as the item that I'm clustering. I could cluster a remote desktop server, a bunch of other services. I'm just deciding to cluster a web server. That's my cat. I'm going to wait for these machines to boot. While it's booting, I'm going to pause this video. Okay class, both web servers are booted up. I'm going to press Control-Delete. I'm on www1 to sign in. While that's signing in, I'm going to jump over to www2 and sign in. Control-Delete. So the IP scheme that we have to use for ACE-IT is 10.0.0.0 something. So we're going to use these, the last octet, but everything else is going to be 10.0.0 because every time we build a lab in ACE-IT, I'm going to go back to the lab. If I don't include my own NAT router, we have to use the scheme assigned by ACE-IT because they have a built-in NAT router. And just to save machine space, I'm using that built-in NAT router, and that passes out IP from the 10 range. So everything will be the same, but the first 3 octets will be 10.0.0, and the subnet mask will be /24. So I'm going to go back to www1. I'm going to go to local server. Double click on the network cards. We have 2 network cards. And I'm going to go back to the network diagram. We're going to use 1 network card for our cluster and 1 network card for our normal network traffic. So the first network card I'm going to call NLB, Network Load Balance. And the next one I'm just going to call private. So in our diagram, the odd number IPs will be NLB, and the even number IP addresses for the last octet will be our private network cards. So I'm going to go to Properties, double click IPv4, and type 10.0.0.9, 255.255.255. The gateway for that built-in router on ACE is 0.1, and our DNS server will be our DC. I'm just going to show you that now. 10.0.0.2. So that's going to be the machine that resolves IP addresses for our network. So I'm going to click OK, click OK, click Close. And for private, I'm going to use the next IP. I'm going to go to the network diagram. That's going to be 10.0.0.10. I'm back on www1. Ten dot zero dot zero dot 10 255 dot 255 dot 255 dot 0. The gateway was automatically filled out because I put it in the other NIC card. And our DNS server will be 10.0.0.2. Now when I click OK, it's going to give me an error saying I have two gateways. The gateway is the gateway of last resort, meaning if you don't know where to send the packet, send it out that gateway. So there shouldn't be two gateways. You should only have one per computer. But when it sees I add a second gateway, it's going to generate an error, which will be no problem because both machines are using, both network cards are using the same gateway. It'll generate the error, just click OK. If we don't put it in there, then we have a problem with our computer later when we set up the cluster. So we'll click OK. It's giving me a warning about multiple gateways. That's fine. Click Yes, close, then close. The next thing I'm going to do is rename this computer. If you hit refresh, it'll show you your two IP addresses there. I'm having an error with this one. I don't know why. I'm just going to hit refresh again. I know why. www2 is using an IP address. Let me explain how I know there's a problem. It says I have multiple IP addresses. When I go into it and click detail, I have the address that I assigned, then a PEEP address. From experience, I know when I see a PEEP address, I'm probably using an IP address that another computer on this network is using. So when I try to assign 10.0.0.10, when I try to assign that IP address, it's looking and seeing if another computer uses it. If another computer uses it, it won't assign it. So it assigns a PEEP address. So now I'm on www2 and I can see that that IP address is being used here. So what I can do is temporarily just disable this NIC and disable this NIC while I'm configuring www1. So I did that on www2. I'm going to go back to www1. I don't know what I did here. Okay, so I'm just going to, because I know it's configured properly, I'm just going to disable it and re-enable it. And it should not see that there's a duplicated IP address because I disabled the other ones. So by disabling it and re-enabling it, it kind of refreshes it. See, now I don't get a duplicate IP warning. So now I'm going to go to computer name, click change, and type in www1 in all lowercase. Click OK, OK, close, then restart the computer. Okay, the machine is rebooted now, so I'm going to sign in. We're going to go to local server. Guys, I should have joined it to the domain at the same time. I didn't, so I'm going to have to do it now. So I'm going to go to work group, change, click OK, put in my domain, administrator account, click OK. Again, reboot. While that's rebooting, I'm going to jump over to www2 and configure the IP addresses. So the first one I'm going to name NLB, and the second one will be called private. Both these network cards are attached to the same physical switch. And so I'm going to go back to my network diagram. For the NLB, it'll be 10.0.0.11. For the private interface, it'll be 10.0.0.12. My DNS server is 10.0.0.2, and the gateway for the NLB network is 10.0.0.1. Click OK. And the next network card. (10.0.0.12) and 255.255.255.0. It automatically populated my gateway. It will give me a warning saying I can't have multiple gateways, so that's fine. It's the same gateway, just on two different NICs. Close it out. You can hit refresh. Still having a problem. I'm going to try to go into that and see what the issue is. I don't know if I didn't click enter or something. I'm not sure why that happened. It should be .11. So this one should be .11. and this one is .12. I'm going to go in and double check the gateway because it's showing it's been removed. I'm just going to add it back. Windows is trying to correct the issue, and I don't want it to correct. I just want it to leave it alone. Just go back, double check each interface. .11 has a gateway. .12 has a gateway. Okay, so that's fine. So now I'm going to rename and join the domain. Going to type in my domain admin account. I renamed the computer www2. Going to restart. While it's restarting, I'm going to jump back to www1. Okay, now I've rebooted. I'm going to jump over to other user to make sure I sign in as a domain admin account. I'm on www1. I'm going to do the same thing to www2. I'm going to sign in as the domain admin. I'm going to click on other user. Using our standard password. While that's signing in, I'm jumping over to www2. I'll pause the video. I got disconnected. Okay, I just refreshed my screen and it came back up. So I'm signed into www1. I'm on my dashboard. I'm going to add some software. So I'm going to click on Manage, Add Roles and Features. I'm going to go all the way down to Server Roles. For this server roles, I'm going to add the web server software. That's a role. And then it's going to prompt me to add all the tools, and I click Add Features. Then I'm going to go to the feature window, and then I'm going to install network load balancing and add the tools for network load balancing. So in the previous window, under server roles, I added web server. For features, I added network load balancing. See right here where it says remote server admin tools, when we clicked add features, when that pop-up came up, that's what it did automatically. Click next and just keep walking through the wizard. We're not making any changes. You can reboot if necessary. I'm going to do the same thing to www2. I'm going to go to Manage, Add Roles and Features. Keep going down to Server Roles and add the web server. Then the tools to manage it. Go to Features. Add the network load balancing and the tools to manage it. Then walk through the wizard. Click Install. I'm going to go back, check the status of www1. I'm going to pause the video while they are installing. Okay, it's installed on www1. So when I installed the web server, it created this directory, inetpub. So I'm going to open up a Powershell. I'm going to change my resolution so you can see it. The font size, rather. So I'm going to make a directory. I'm just using regular DOS commands. So I didn't mean to do that. So in our inetpub folder, I created this folder called website. This is where all your websites should be stored. We can host multiple websites on one web server. So when I installed the web server, it created this inetpub folder. And in that folder, I created another folder called website. So by default, the web server, when someone connects to this web server, it automatically passes out a file called index.html. So I'm going to echo server, actually I'm just going to use test into a file So guys, I didn't type this. This is all part of my prompt. The only thing I typed was this. So I'm going to put the word test in this document that doesn't exist. So before I hit enter, I'm going to go into the website folder. I can see that it's blank. When I come back here and hit enter, now I have that index.html document in there. If I open this up, it's going to have the word test in it. All I'm doing is creating some web content for us to host on our website. I'm going to do the same thing to www2. The software is installed. I'm going to open up a Powershell. I'm going to change the font. Make dir c:\inet pub, because that folder was created when I installed the web server software. And now I'm going to create a subfolder called website. I'm going to echo test into inetpub. website inside of a file called index.html. So if I go into inetpub, website, I see that file. So I've done the same thing to www1 and www2. Now I need to configure my web server to host that web content. So I'm going to go to Tools, inetpub, Internet and Information Services Manager. IIS, that's my web server. I'm going to expand the web server. I'm going to expand sites. I could see this website, the default website, is being bound to any IP on this machine, port 80. So I'm going to right click, add a website. Whatever you want here. That name is just for this list. It doesn't have any bearing on the name that I'm hosting the website. So I'm going to browse for the inetpub folder, the website folder. I don't need to say index.html because I just supply the folder and automatically looks for a file in there called index.html. So right now, my default website is bound to any IP, port 80. So if I try to click enter now, this website will never start because I'm already using that bindings. So I need to have unique bindings on every website on this server. So I'm going to separate this website by putting a host header value. So when you go to a website and you type in an address in your URL field of your browser, that serves two purposes. One, to get you to that web server who's hosting that website, and that value is also placed in the HTTP GET request in the host header field of that packet, so it knows which website you want on that web server. So the address is not only used to get you to the web server, but it also places that address in the HTTP GET packet. So when it's sent to the web server will look for a matching value on one of your websites. So that's how to know which website you want. So I'm going to click OK. So I can see the bindings are different. If I put any IP, this machine has, like the loopback, it'll get me this website. But if I put the name, it'll actually get me this website. So I can't have two websites on the same server with the same exact bindings. We separate our websites by using the host header value. So we have to fix DNS, so this is resolvable in DNS, and we need to make sure our users type that name in the URL field to get this particular website. I'll show you what I'm talking about later. So I'm going to close this out. Now I'm going to do the same thing on www2. We created some web content. Now I need to host that web content in my web server. So I'm on www2. I'm going to go down to Internet Information Services. So I'm going to expand my server, highlight sites. There's the default site that comes with every server. So I'm going to right click, add a website. I'm just going to call it whatever. I don't want you to confuse that with the name of the people actually type in the in the browser. So I'm going to browse for the C drive, the inetpub folder, the website folder. Click OK. Then we'll put in the bindings, www.contoso.com. Click OK. So now I'm hosting my web content on both web servers. Now I'm going to configure the NLB, the network load balancing. Actually, before I do, I'm going to resolve www.contoso.com to an IP address. So I'm going to go to DC DNS. I'm going to sign in. I'm going to go to Tools, then DNS. I'm going to go to forward lookup zone and go to Contoso. Double click it. Give me 1 second. I might have an issue here because it doesn't have a record for these two machines. I'm going to go back to www1 and open up PowerShell. I'm going to type register Dns Client. I'll go back to my DC. Highlight Contoso, hit refresh. I still don't have it. Just as a precaution, I'm going to restart this machine. I'm going to pause the video while it's restarting. Sorry, I forgot to click continue. Now I'm going to pause the video. Okay, my DC is rebooted, so I'm going to sign back in. I'm waiting for the server manager to come back up. I'm going to go to Tools, DNS. I'm going to go to forward lookup zone, then Contoso. So I still don't have any records for www. So I'm going to try to go back to www1 and rerun that command. That should contact the DNS server, create something called a host record and a pointer record for this machine. I'm going to go back to DC DNS. Highlight Contoso, hit refresh. It's still not creating pointer records, so I'm just going to create them manually. So I'm going to right click, create a new host record. www1, then type in the IP 10.0.0.9. You might not need to do this. I'm going to just go back to the map. So this one should have 9 and 10. I'm also going to create the pointer record in the reverse at the same time. I'll show you that. So I'm going to create a record for the first IP, then do www1 and do it for the second IP, 10.0.0.10. That's this IP here. Click Add Host. Now I'm going to do it for the second machine, www2. That should be 10.0.0.11. That's this one right here. Click Add Host and do one for www2 10.0.0.0/.12. Okay, so guys, normally these are done automatically. I'm not sure why they're not done here, why it's not being done automatically, but there's my reverse records, 9, 10, 11, 12 for those machines. And I'm just going to right click here and look at something. Go to Properties. Yeah, Dynamic Updates is turned on, so it should work. I'm not sure why it didn't. Maybe I need to reboot my 2 web servers, I'm not sure. I just did it manually. I need to be able to resolve those names to those IPs. Now, I'm also going to create a new record. This is the reason why I came here to begin with, was to create a new record for www. So I'm going to go to New Host. I'm going to type www. I'm going to give it an IP address of 10.0.0.100. That's going to be the IP I'm going to be using in my cluster. When I go through and configure the cluster, this will automatically, I want to use this IP for that cluster. And it'll automatically add this IP to both machines in the cluster wizard. I'll show you how to do that next. So I added a host record, an A record for www 10.0.0.100. And when I did, I had this box checked. So it also created the reverse. Here's when I send in a name, www.contoso.com, it resolves it to 10.0.0.100. And when I created that pointer record, the reverse, I'm going to hit refresh. This DNS utility is kind of janky. It doesn't refresh automatically, so you might have to refresh a lot. It also created the reverse. When I send in this IP, 10.0.0.100, it will resolve that IP to this name, www.contoso.com. So I did the forward lookup is when you send in a name, get back an IP. And the reverse lookup, when you send in an IP, it sends back a name. So I wanted to resolve www.contoso.com to 10.0.0.100. That will be the IP address that we use in our cluster. So now I'm going to configure the cluster. So I'm going to go to www1. I'm going to type exit to close this window out. So now I'm going to configure the cluster. So I'm going to go to Tools, Network Load Balancing Manager. So the first thing I'm going to do is create the cluster and add www1 as a host in that cluster. Then I'm going to come back through and add the second machine into that cluster. So I'm going to right click, create a new cluster. The first machine that's going to be part of that cluster will be www1. Guys, I like to use the short name to make sure that the layer 2 communication, the network access layer, is working properly. So I'm going to try to connect. So it finds that machine, which is good because I'm on that machine, and it shows me the 2 network cards for that machine. Now, when we first started this lab, I had you relabel the interfaces, NLB and private. And I said the NLB network card will be used in the cluster, and the private card will be used for normal network communication. So in this case, it's asking me, which interface do you want to use in the cluster? I'm going to use the NLB. And I sort of have it in the back of my head, a convention, that the NLB NICs are always the odd ones. So I'm going to click Next. It's going to add that to the cluster. When this machine boots up, it's automatically going to start the cluster. And if the cluster has no load, that this will be the first machine it will send any requests to. So this will be the priority 1. Meaning, network load balancing, it tries to sense which server is being utilized more. And then it tries to send the request to other servers. But if both servers are being utilized the same, it'll prefer this one over the other member, over the other cluster member. Click Next. It's asking, what IP address do we want to use in the cluster? So this is where we add the 100 address. So I'm putting 10.0.0.100, and I'm using the subnet mask that we have to use for ACE. I'll click OK. So that's the IP we're going to use for our cluster. Click Next, and we're going to do www.contoso.com. Guys, we should be able to use unicast, but it doesn't work right on virtual machines, so I'm going to use multicast. If I can click it. Click Next. Which ports are we going to use? I'm going to have all the ports be part of the cluster. If I wanted to, I could just say only port 80. Edit this and just say port 80 to port 80 TCP, because that's what I know the web server listens on, but it's not necessary. If I tell it to handle all ports and a port isn't open, it'll still work. You know, because if you don't install software to open up a port, that port's not open. So I'm going to click Finish. It's going to take a minute. I don't want to do anything until this becomes green. When it becomes green, I have something called a converged network, meaning it connected to all the machines that's part of the cluster. So right now, I only have one machine that's part of my cluster, WW1, and I'm using the NLB interface on that member to be part of the cluster. Guys, I'm just going to show you something else now. I'm going to go back to Server Manager, go to Local Server. You see how it has multiple addresses now? I'm going to go to that NLB interface and click Details. I can see that it actually assigned that IP address 10.0.0.100 to that interface. Did it automatically. I'm going to go to Properties. When I installed NLB, it added this to the network card. I'm just going to press Cancel. Actually, I'm going to go back in there and show you something else. Under under IPv4, if I go to properties, then advanced, I can see it has 2 IP addresses assigned to that one interface. Press cancel, press cancel, press cancel. Close it. I didn't make any changes. I was just showing you something. So now I'm going back to my NLB software. I'm going to highlight my cluster, right click it. I'm going to add a host to the cluster. I'm going to add www2. Again, I'm going to use the short name so it does a NetBIOS broadcast to find that computer. If it can find the computer here, then I know my layer 2 communication is working. If it can't, there's an issue. You could try the fully qualified domain name and use DNS to resolve the name. If I use a fully qualified domain name, I'm using DNS. At that point, I'm not sure if layer 2 is working. And NLB uses a lot of tricks with layer 2. Both machines are going to respond to that layer 2 address. Both machines in my cluster. It's going to create a MAC address, a virtual MAC address that both machines will use. That's what I mean by layer 2 communication. So I'm going to connect. It can resolve that name to an IP using layer 2 communication, NetBIOS, and then I'm going to use NLB interface and add that part of the cluster. So that will be the interface that it adds that second IP address, 10.0.0.100. Both www1 and www2 will share a MAC address and that cluster IP, 10.0.0.1. Excuse me, 10.0.0.100. Click Next. That'll be the IP address used for the cluster. This will have a priority of 2. All this is already configured out when we created our cluster. So we're going to use the same ports as the other machine. And I'm waiting for converged status. Now it remotely configured www2 for me. It added the second IP to this NLB interface. So I'm not going to go to it. I'm just going to open up a browser. I don't believe we have Chrome installed on this. So it's okay. So I'm going to just use Internet Explorer. I'm going to type in www.contoso.com. There's our website. I just want to show you something here. I'm going to go to www2, sign in. And I can see on www2, if I go to my NLB interface, click on details, I can see that it has that IP as well, the .100. So I'm back on www1. So if I go into Powershell and do NS lookup, www.contoso.com, I can see that resolves to 10.0.0.100 because we added that record in DNS. Both machines respond to that IP address. So how do I know which server I'm connecting to? You don't. That's the whole point. If you have a lot of web traffic, you want to share that load across several machines. So now that's what my NLB is doing. I don't know if I'm connecting to www1 or www2. That's all done in the background by the NLB software. Guys, I just want to go to IIS. When I go to look at my websites, and look at the bindings, this one doesn't have a host header value. It just has an IP address, meaning any IP address on this machine, port 80. This one is any IP address on this machine, and port 80, and a host header value of www.contoso.com. But look what happens if I go into my browser. I'm going to create a new tab. I'm going to go to www.1.contoso.com. Now, which website will the web server give me? Hit enter. It's going to give me the default website, because when you think about it, it's the IP of that machine, because remember, that machine has 3 IPs. 10.0.0.9, 10.0.0.10, and 10.0.0.100. So this web server will use any of those 3 IPs, port 80, with any host header value that doesn't match any other site. So when I sent that request in, the web server says this is the best match, because it got me to this web server, but it didn't have the same host header value, so it gave me this IP. So it gave me this website as opposed to this one. The only time I'll get this website is when I actually type the word www.contoso.com. So that IP address, so that value I typed there did 2 things. It was used to resolve the IP to a name, the name to an IP to get me to this web server. Then it uniquely identified this web server from all the other web servers that my web server is hosting. It uniquely identified this website on this web server from all the other websites that I was hosting. In this case, 2. Because I don't have any website with the host header value of www.1.contoso.com, it showed the default website. If I went here and changed the bindings, to .1, I don't want to do this, but I'm just showing you to demonstrate it. Click OK, close. If I refresh this, it shows me a default website. Now if I go here to www.contoso.com and refresh, now it's going to give me the default website. So this one is the custom website that I created, because that's what the host header value matches. And this is the default. I'm going to go back and change it back. I'm going to go to bindings, edit this, back to the www.contoso.com host header value, click OK, OK. So now when I refresh this, it doesn't match the host header value of www.contoso.com, so it's going to give me the default website. Now this one will match the host header value www.contoso.com, so it'll give me my custom website. Okay, guys, that's NLB clustering software. It's not very robust. I'm going to go back to the software. It's not a difficult setup. It's been around for a long time. It's very stable. If one of those machines in my cluster goes down, The NLB software will stop sending requests to that machine until it's brought back up. This will automatically start every time I boot up this computer, so NLB is fully set up. That's going to be it for this video, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.